Receipt of the agenda items. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Fox, second by Councillor Whitmarsh. All those in favour? Opposed and carried. Next item is the adoption of the minutes of the regular evening council meeting on June 11th and the public hearing meeting of June 11th. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Davis, second by Councillor Sparrow. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none. All those in favour? Opposed, and that carries. And there are no presentations. We move to delegations, which there are 4. And the first delegation is Mark Elias of KCD Consulting Incorporated. If Mark is here, if you can come forward, please. Oh, I guess he's not here. So we'll go on to D2, Mr. Eric Woodward. Is Mr. Woodward here? Yeah, there he is. And just for all the delegates' information, it's 5 minutes. You just provide your name and where you live for the clerk, and you'll have 5 minutes to speak, not including questions from council. Welcome here.
The overhead projector?
Yeah, we'll let you get set up first.
How do I zoom it out?
Is that art?
So thanks again for accepting the delegation. My name is Eric Woodward. I live at 9220 Glover Road. I'll try to get through it as quickly as I can. It's going to be a lot, so it's going to go by pretty quickly with only 5 minutes. So I'm here to speak to the so-called Heritage Property Maintenance Standards Bylaw that was given first, second, third reading at the last council meeting and is potentially adopted this evening. I just didn't even know the bylaw, of course, until the same day it had received first and second, third reading. There was no notice or opportunity for public input, so I'm here to request that it be slowed down and given some public input. It affects approximately 120 properties in Fort Langley and Murrayville. But clearly when you have a heritage property with confirmed heritage value or a designation, there's some good stuff in this bylaw, but approximately half of the bylaw speaks to buildings within arbitrary boundaries that are not heritage buildings. And for those that don't know, this new bylaw would compel me to replace the current plywooded buildings in Fort Langley with a product called polycarbonate to an absolute degree everywhere on the entire building, even at the rear. So what will end up happening is we walk down the sidewalk in Fort Langley. A lot of these buildings are right on the sidewalk. We'll be seeing inside two derelict buildings. These are not buildings that are rentable. This is not a game. They're not perfectly fine buildings that just need windows. I did not even heard of polycarbonate until I downloaded the proposed bylaw. So basically, it's for those that don't know, because I didn't, it's basically a clear plastic, bulletproof plastic. Plywood is $20 a sheet. Polycarbonate is $300 a sheet. So at about 75 sheets, because there's quite a bit of waste to install it properly and quite a bit of labor to install it to the exacting standards in which we did the plywood, the total cost to me will be $28,500. Now, I've been subsidizing these older buildings, the ones that have been boarded up now, for years. 13 years I've been subsidizing these buildings because I had one long-term lease that I had to deal with. And now that that lease is gone, we've been looking to replace these buildings, which isn't going to be happening anytime soon. So I'm just simply not going to subsidize them anymore. And so that's why they're in the state that they are. They were in a horrible condition when I purchased them, and I've done the best that I can over the last 15 years to keep them going at significant cost. And now the tenants are relocating because they assume developments will be approved, and tenants are retiring. They're permanently vacant, and they now cost more to renovate than they do to build new. And that is the definition of the end of economic life, the very definition of it, very basic economics. And I think the township understands this as well, that when you have an older building that needs money, you need to have a justification for it. And the example I have is the Holiday House here in Fort Langley. So the township purchased this in 2005 and was in a very similar situation as me. You need economics to justify investing money, and they chose to do what they've done here, put plywood on it. So, what I'd like to know is when we're going to start discussing an actual solution, because this doesn't address the underlying problem, which is basic economics of development and maintaining older buildings. I don't, I think it's time that we actually start looking at how we're going to make a decision to solve this problem, not put a Band-Aid on it. And I think that that's exactly what this is. You know, I've spent almost $300,000 in architecture fees attempting to produce designs that will be acceptable. And the response has been to remove a heritage building for the sake of a new four-way intersection. And I can't get anybody to deal with that. So how much money do we have to keep spending and spending and spending to deal with a situation that isn't going to be resolved by bulletproof plastic? So I want to remove these buildings. I've been trying to redevelop these sites. And I'm trying to develop them in a way that I think is good, I think is balanced. You know, playgrounds, hotels, rooftop patios, new restaurants, boutique retail, mixed use, variety of housing, hundreds of cars underground. Great future for the commercial core of Fort Langley that other areas like Aldergrove dream of. You want plastic, bulletproof windows. I'm trying to redevelop these sites, generate millions and millions in tax revenue, hundreds of new jobs, tens of millions in annual economic development, and I just need a decision about an intersection, and I get a bylaw about bulletproof plastic fake windows. So I want to talk about a real solution. I want you to please reconsider this approach. This doesn't solve the problem. This forces me to spend $30,000 for a purpose I don't quite understand, when now we're going to walk down the sidewalk and see into derelict buildings, not actually solve the problem. So please reconsider this approach. Instead, please just work with me to make a decision on what we want to do in Fort Langley. Does the pedestrian character matter, or are we moving heritage buildings for no reason? I just need a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any questions?
No, there's no questions. Oh, I got
No
one.
questions?
Councillor Richter.
Yeah, you referenced that the bylaw speaks to a number of properties that don't have heritage value. So, but these, okay, so the buildings that you've got boarded up, do any of them have heritage value?
No.
No. Okay, so why don't you just demolish them?
Well, I think we've gone over this multiple times. I've put out information about why we're not demolishing them. To separate them into two different categories, the residential and the commercial structures. There's 2 residential structures and there's 4 commercial structures that I would like to remove. I think 5 commercial structures actually I'd like to remove. And there's an issue around the parking credits on those commercial structures. So a couple of people have made comments to me, well, you don't need those parking credits because you're tens of stalls over the bylaw requirement with the proposals. But those parking credits will be critical if we end up building, a 2-story structure of some kind, some decade or 2 from now, if this impasse isn't resolved. Or if the next person that comes after me wants to propose that, since if we can never get a resolution to this, at some point it's going to solve itself. I won't live forever. So the question would be then, if you're going to propose a 2-story structure, those parking credits are critical. And so they're not really critical for me, but they're critical for doing a 2-story structure, which isn't possible without them. So if I demolish those buildings, that bylaw states that I lose those if I don't commence construction within 6 months. Whereas, say, something like the development cost charges runs with the land, right? These parking credits do not. So if that problem were solved, then I could remove them.
So how many parking credits are we talking about here?
I think on one site it's 5 or 6. I think on another one it's 30 or 40.
So you don't want to lose the parking credits. That's why you're not going to tear the building
I think
down?
you have to reserve the option to, potentially look at a 2-story structure at some point in the future, or someone else could do that. They wouldn't be able to build that kind of a structure without those parking credits.
Okay.
So if I were to remove the buildings and lose those, then we're potentially not building anything ever. At least with the way the bylaws are structured today.
With the way the bylaw is structured today. Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to thank you very much for coming to speak to us, because I think we were under the impression that you just wanted to be left alone. So it's good of you to come today. I did want to ask you about this business of putting polycarbonate all the way around. Like, some of your buildings are street facing, so that makes sense that you would have polycarbonate maybe on the street side, but why would it be needed like 360 degrees around the building?
I don't know. That's what the bylaw states. So I think that would be something that potentially could be amended if the concern is street facing. I think if you're looking at these buildings, there two of them or three of them are directly at the sidewalk. They are not set back from the sidewalk even by a couple of feet. So as you walk by, you're going to be staring in and seeing these buildings and the inside of them, which isn't going to be very appealing. I don't know what's being gained by this at all, let alone the rear or the back or the front.
The inside of the buildings are ugly to look at, or?
No, they're not pristine rentable buildings. No, and some of them have been environmentally abated already to deal with asbestos and some toxic materials. Some of the windows had lead in them, so they've been removed and disappeared. So no, these are not buildings that we want to be peering into the inside of. No.
Okay. I guess the concern I have is that we're in a situation that seems like it's going to be long-term, like boarded up buildings or buildings not being torn down. So what's the easiest or quickest way to get around that?
I'm not sure I know what you're asking me. You're asking me for what the quick fix is?
What's the quick fix here?
Well, I think you could amend the bylaw. The Fort Langley, I forget the exact name of it, off-street parking bylaw, I believe, to allow the parking credits to run with the land. That would be one option. And then, of course, I'd have to apply to remove them. I'm not allowed to remove them. I don't really want to go through a political process similar to this one to simply be able to do the right thing and remove buildings. So I think you're still dealing with that problem. And of course, the solution would be to allow me to replace them.
Okay. So now there's been some stuff on social media recently relative to the situation that you're in up in Fort Langley. Has that been a clear and proper record of what's actually happened or transpired?
I mean, I think some of that stuff that was recently posted last week was not very nice. Yeah, it wasn't very accurate in some key aspects. It was very personal, and I don't see the point of it. I don't see it as an attack to simply ask people to make a decision on a key development requirement, but apparently it's perceived that way. I don't know why.
And you said when you started out that you feel that this bylaw needs public input. Why?
I think it's private property rights issue. You know, there's a lot of properties in these heritage conservation areas that are not heritage buildings. I don't think anybody argues that they are. There's sections of the heritage conservation area in Fort Langley especially that aren't considered heritage areas, similar to what Glover Road is. I hear this all the time, that Glover Road is what matters. And there's quite a few residential properties, for example, up and around the museum that would be subject to this bylaw, that if you owned one of these houses and say we're waiting a year to get an approval to subdivide it or redevelop it, you'd be faced with spending potentially $10,000 to properly board it in accordance with this bylaw. I don't think it's been thought through thoroughly enough, and I think some public input might reveal some good options to amend it before it's adopted.
Before it's adopted,
Yeah.
okay.
I think it's being adopted in a vacuum. I think it's being drafted in a vacuum. For example, no one from the Township of Langley has even come to look at these buildings, and yet we're passing bylaws to create windows to look inside of them. Fraser Health has looked at them, but no one from the township has looked at them. So maybe there's an assumption that they're perfectly fine, which they're not. And we're passing bylaws to create windows. And I don't really understand why that's a desirable outcome. I don't think it solves the problem. It's not going to make it any better.
And that picture you've got up there, that's a building that the township owns, and they've used plywood on it, right?
That's, that building, I run out of 5 minutes isn't much time. But for those that don't know, that's the Haldy House built in 1895, owned by the township for 13 years. Apparently they don't have a responsibility to maintain it, though, which was posted this week on Facebook. Only others do, right? So I think that there's a bit of, it doesn't feel 100% kosher to be putting requirements on others that don't seem to be applicable to the township. And I think it's about economics. It's not about anybody doing something wrong, that the economics, to make sense, to wait before you invest taxpayer dollars and have an economic use for that building prior to restoring it. Well, why doesn't that logic apply to me as well?
Question.
That's all. That's fine.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, thank
Thanks.
you very much. Okay, the next delegation is Mr. Doug Beliski.
Good evening. My name is Doug Beliski. I live in South Aldergrove, right near the world's largest grow-up. There we go. Okay, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Fox at the last council meeting, proposing that he help our organization make an application to the Farm Review Board, and all the councillors and the mayor for unanimously voting for it. So we appreciate that. We're here today, and there's a whole group of us here today to support us, to help protect us from an industrial cannabis grow-up. What we're asking for, a request for action, is quite simple. We would like to see if we can't create a committee that would dedicate itself to the bigger plan, which is protecting all communities from these large industrial cannabis grow-ops. And second of all, for our community itself, actively pursue some of these current violations that are going on, which we've been complaining a lot about. What would make a great statement? Don't permit the coming recreational use and growing of marijuana in these facilities. Our operation is currently 2/3 full. They want to add another 100,000 plants. It'll exacerbate our problems. And we'd like to see maybe, possibly, a request to the Premier and the Minister of Agriculture requesting a moratorium on further MMPFs in this province until there's some sort of public consultation, maybe with the farmers, with the people, with our communities. See what's happening right now. It really needs to be acknowledged what's happening right now. And then what I'd like to do now is go through this PowerPoint and show you what's happening. The first slide here just is basically what I just talked about. Raise some awareness, determine who the people are that are involved in this grow-op operation, and there's a lot. And there's a lot of the audience probably doesn't even know about. And if they had one in their neighborhood, they wouldn't even know what to do about it. And we're actually gathering a lot of information that needs to go out there. It really does. And we need to address these issues. We need to address these issues so they stop happening. And that's a business of raising awareness. We've now connected with 3 communities. The first one you'll see is Wannock. The people from Wannock here? There we are. They're the Tantalus group. It's a much smaller organization out there, but they are having nothing but problems. And that particular organization, which I think they have 500 plants. On the first day ours got plants, it was 100,000. They claim that this organization here is doing a great job. According to the Vancouver air quality people, ask them. They're not doing a great job. And they want to increase themselves to 1,000 plants. Remind you, we have 200,000 plants. NOTL stands for Niagara on the Lake. This is what Canopy Corp says is their, what's happening there is they say they're having no problems there. One of our members phoned, well, they Googled it and found a winery nearby and phoned them and said, well, how's it going there? Said it's terrible. The odor is unbelievable. And it's getting into their grapes. And if you'll see after, I'll show you a picture of theirs. And Saanich is the one where the organization there, which is trying to protect the ALR, is asking for that request to the Premier and to the Minister of Agriculture to ask for that moratorium. I think it would be a great idea that this council considered that as well. These are the players here. We have emails of them. Some of them we have no names for because, like, for example, the Minister of Health, it's just an address. We don't even have a name for somebody we're talking to there. ALC, Township Lang, Canopy Growth is the person we're working against. BC Assessment Authority. Our organization is still claiming farm tax, where they actually don't get to do that. Here's our problems. Light, odor, noise. Sunday morning at 7 a.m., they were spraying using a helicopter. Sunday morning, that's yesterday morning, chalk onto the roofs of the 30-acre grow up. Sunday morning. Previous morning, 6 a.m., they're weed eating along their fence line. That's right across the road from several of our neighbors. Okay? They just installed, 6 more of these misting cannons right along that fence line, which is 4th Avenue. Oh, that's where all our neighbors are. That's part of the noise problem, which they're trying to use to mask the odor problem.
Your 5 minutes is up. If you can just
Okay.
wrap it up.
Okay.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you. Questions?
Okay, thank you very much. This obviously has been an issue with this council for many years. It went through a lot of processes, whether it was grow-ups in houses in residential areas, to new regulations coming down from the federal government that, as a local government, we have absolutely no say on and no jurisdiction, to some rules coming through the province and through the Agricultural Land Commission. This council has been fairly, working hard to see, first of all, if these types of operations would be grown in industrial areas. That was turned down and by the Agricultural Land Commission. They're now a farm, according to the Agricultural Land Commission, their farm allowed to grow on the farmland. And however, working with the industry, we're trying, but we don't have a lot of jurisdiction. I think you already understand that. As a municipality, we don't have a lot of jurisdiction because it comes under the province and it comes under Health Canada. However, this council is still working with the province and asking for some assistance in regulating this new industry. I mean, they've been growing marijuana for a long time, or cannabis, but it's a new industry in this form. Yet we don't have the means to control how they control their odors. But certainly, we've been working with the minister and asking for that. So I think, and also we have to. When the fact of the matter is that the province says this is a legitimate business in farmland, we have to respect the farm owner also, just like we do other farms that have nuisance odors and smells. However, there are, normal farm practices, which we don't really know what they are in this industry yet, and trying to get to that place. I think we're on the same page, but we're kind of without any jurisdiction for a lot of it. But advocating for, working with both you and with the farmer, I think is where we certainly can help. But there's other members of council here that have some comments, and I'll let them comment on also.
It's actually interesting because the farmer who owns that is about to be bought out by Canopy Corporation.
Yeah, and so as long as it's a farm allowed by the ALC, which it is, and we did request along with other municipalities that it wouldn't be, but that ship sailed, so they're there, and now we have the issues, and we're trying to get some help from the province on regulations, and we don't have that yet.
No, but we would like to be involved in that process as well. That's part of what we're asking for.
And that's fine.
Yes.
That's great that you have a grassroots committee that's going to start up and deal with some of these issues. That's great. As a municipality, we don't have the jurisdiction to go in and start dictating to operators what they can do and can't do at this point. It's really up to the province. But I'll let the other councillors speak, and then Councillor Fox, you're up.
Do we have the opportunity to comment or just ask questions?
You can do both.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question first. Have you started or put in a FIRB complaint yet?
That has started. It has not been put in, so this is where we are getting help from yourself and the council on it.
Because I know Mr. Story, who's up there, is a staff member who could help you with that. The problem with the FIRB complaint is there's a beautiful picture of it, right? I see the Conways over there, up there in the audience, who live in that well, their kids live in that house right to the east. There must be nice prevailing winds there on certain days. The problem with the FIRB complaint, and I've put one in myself on the mushroom composting, is that the Farm Industry Review Board develops standards over time and expectations over time. And this industry is so new and has arrived on our doorstep so quickly and without any notification that it really is creating a significant problem, not only in the township, but across a number of other jurisdictions. So I think what the value of a FIRB report is, we need to make the awareness to the Farm Industry Review Board that quite legitimately this is not an appropriate activity. They need to get their lines of demarcation, if you want to say what is best practice. There is no best practice in growing cannabis, unfortunately, because it just sort of arrived. Yeah, you can have 6 plants or 20 plants or 40 plants. That's one thing. But, you know, the size, this magnitude. So I think that's really a number one thing we've got to do. The township has written to the Minister of Agriculture and explained the situation very succinctly, like this is not appropriate on ALR lands. This is not an appropriate use of ALR lands. On Friday last week, Councillor Long and I are the directors of Metro Vancouver, and we brought this up to Metro Vancouver at the table. And we brought it up under the Metro Vancouver, I just got to find it here, Caring for the Air 2018 report, which on page 18, I just got to find page 18 right here, clearly states that, I'm just telling you this so you know, okay? Metro Vancouver is responsible for managing and regulating air quality in our region. With an increasing number of complaints from the public about unpleasant odors emanating from a variety of sources, the newest being, including compost and food processing facilities, the current approach to manage odor management needs to be improved. So under that guise, I said, okay, and brought it up in public. That's great, compost and food processing, but I said we have a new player in the market here, and that is Cannabis Operations. I said your managing odor in Metro Vancouver is short and deficient in one particular area, and that's now on the radar is cannabis growing operations. So we discussed this in the context of a couple of things. There's two issues here. Number one is the advent of these cannabis growing operations, and number two is they're converting existing food growth operations into cannabis. So you're losing food and replacing it with cannabis. Peppers, tomatoes, lettuce, cucumbers, whatever. And this is just the first of many that is likely to happen. And it was very interesting, the reaction that we got. And I can say unilaterally, and Councillor Long can respond to this as well, that Metro Vancouver is extremely concerned. I think we've lit a fire under them, because I think they're realizing. We had Bruce McDonald from Delta speak up and say they're in exactly the same boat. They've got tremendous pressures on their greenhouse operations. Harold Steves from Richmond, a number of people spoke to this particular issue. John Becker from Pitt Meadows. Nicole Reed wasn't there. So we didn't hear anything from Maple Ridge. But a couple of things came out of that meeting that I just want to make you aware of. Number one, Metro Vancouver staff is going to speak directly with UBCM staff, because at the Union of BC Municipalities in September, there's a motions going on the floor, and any council members from here that are going to it, there's motions on the floor with respect to growth of growth of cannabis on ALR lands. There's a tremendous concern. It's across the board. City of Spill-A-Machine, we've got, or district or whatever is a Spill-A-Machine. There's other jurisdictions across this province that are concerned about it. Something I learned, there's a Cannabis Secretariat. Did you know there's a Cannabis Secretariat? No, probably not, because I didn't even know that. But Director Carrie Chang from the City of Vancouver is the one that chairs that Cannabis Secretariat. And I would really strongly suggest we get in touch with him. He's a City of Vancouver councillor, because he said he is going to ask the Cannabis Secretariat for a moratorium on any further cannabis grow operations on ALR land. I think that's an actual correct statement that he made in public at that meeting.
That also comes from Saanich as well, the same
Right.
statement.
Right. And I know Saanich is concerned, and there is others. The issue of WCB came up because, in fact, WCB is more interested in the workers that work in there. And there's no regulations yet about people that work in cannabis operations. What's their effect? What, do they get breathing apparatus and so on and so forth? So that's another angle that has not been tested or has been given any credence up until now.
Send their employees out to our area to smoke and eat.
So there's a number of things happening. We have a letter that has been sent to the Minister of Agriculture, again asking for a meeting. Interesting enough, what's the jurisdiction of the Minister of Agriculture? Saanich. Her own people are actually requesting meetings with respect to this very issue. And so there's this sort of question.
Have received no reply.
And received no reply.
Yeah.
So the Minister of Agriculture needs to take some responsibility here and understand the issues. And so what we're trying to do by doing these various different inroads is to get them to understand the issue, that there is a significant issue, and you just can't have people taking away food operations, converting them to cannabis operations in less than 24 hours, literally, and then expecting residents to be satisfied with everything that goes on associated with it. So it becomes a real problem with respect to that, because I understand how quickly that transition happened with this particular greenhouse.
In addition, it was a greenhouse that they didn't build it to be a cannabis growing.
No.
They retrofitted
Right.
it, and they couldn't do it
And
properly.
this council has gone on record as saying that cannabis grow operations should be in industrial areas only, where they can control the growth inside of rectangular buildings with proper scrubbers and appropriate mechanisms to control both odor and particulate and everything else that comes out of it. So anyway, there's a number of things happening on the go. I have no difficulty with you people being a part of any discussions that go forth, but I want you to know that we're taking a message to the various different groups, organizations, and structures that we can to impress upon them the need to, A, put on a moratorium, B, deal with the issues that are affecting quality of life in rural residential areas, and C, although it may end up being grandfathered, there should be no further transitions from greenhouses to cannabis grow operations in ALR lands that are in close proximity to residential. And that's our stand, and that's where we stand, and that's where we hope that somewhere the Ministry of Agriculture will put that moratorium in place for the time being.
Hopefully before they begin the growth of the recreational use.
I've got other.
Yes.
Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that.
Thank you.
Councillor Long.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I just wanted to say I have a motion prepared, and I've been following the Saanich folks, and so I've worded up something very similar. It's going to be a long meeting, as you can tell already, but it will come up under new business if the mayor will allow it, and it would be to do exactly what Councillor Fox has been talking about in terms of getting the moratorium put on it. The LMLGA and other organizations, the Ubcm, have all been championing the same message that you're hearing here. It doesn't belong on agricultural land, so it's unfortunate that that's the way it's gone. When I think there's a window of opportunity to try at least to have that reverted. So that's what our motion will be at the end of the meeting, if the mayor will take it, and you don't have to stay for the whole night, but we'll have that motion at the end of the meeting.
And even if they don't revert, deal with what they're got. That's what we need. That's what we're living in, is dealing with the issues that are currently happening. Whether they revert back or not, we're living in it. If they could just, they keep telling us they're going to. But at this point, it's just all lies.
Okay, Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you very much for coming. I have been in that neighborhood. I made a point of going around after hearing these concerns, although I did know it was in place. But, you know, specifically half a mile away, I could smell it quite strongly. So I just want to echo the comments of my council colleagues to say I am happy that you've come forward. It's very unfortunate under the circumstances that you have to collectivize like this to put this forward to try and get some kind of resolution to it. I do find it very concerning that in this period where we have no real regulatory authority that they could actually expand in doing what they're doing. There's a lot of areas that are prior to us regulating marijuana, such as Denver, and they have odor management protocols that go side by side with them getting a business license. We're not at that stage here, but I really think that the Ministry of Agriculture and the Agricultural Land Commission have to understand that this is, to me, not a normal farm practice, as Councillor Fox has said. This is something that's new, and I am very concerned because of the rapid pace of this kind of development that we're going to end up with these situations where greenhouse operations are being bought and they are not able or unwilling because of their bottom line to retrofit them to a standard. I know Maple Ridge has a very strong standard that they've imposed there, and they actually have purpose-built their marijuana production there, apparently, so that air filtration is already taken care of. But when all you have to do really is look at that photo and you can see what the problem is. It vents right out into the air. And until such time as somebody creates marijuana or cannabis that doesn't have those terpenes in it that actually create the smell, then we're going to have to deal with it. It's challenging. We're a regulated community. I can't tell you how frustrating that can be at times. And so I really agree that we have an opportunity now to do the strongest advocacy, because by the time October rolls around, this to me is our strong window of opportunity to advocate for our community. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Councillor Qualley?
Thanks for being here today. I'm really sorry you're dealing with this, and I can imagine the impact it's having on the quality of life you guys are experiencing down there. I drove down myself to sort of experience what was going on, and I was really surprised at how prevalent it is. Do you, just back to your delegation photos, you had the picture of the helicopter spraying chalk. What's the purpose of the chalk? Do you know?
Chalk covers the greenhouse glass, makes it opaque so the sun reflects off it and less heat on the inside. Also prevents UV from getting into the plant.
And how do you know it was chalk?
I just Googled it.
Oh, okay.
It's quite common. It's actually an old practice. They've got better means of it now, but they've just apparently been doing that every year. I've been there 5 or 6 years. I don't remember them ever doing that. I don't know if anybody else.
I just had never heard of it.
Yeah, but at 7 a.m.
Yeah,
you know, on a Sunday.
Comes back to quality of life issues too down there. So, you know, I just want to reiterate what Councillor Arneson said. This is our window to advocate for change and sort of limitations on this right now. So everybody on council is really concerned about this. So thanks for bringing this to our attention and keep the lines of communication going. We're interested in hearing from you what's going on, and we're trying to do what we can on our side too.
I believe the township's receiving our complaints as well,
Yeah.
so it creates a record.
Thank you for being here.
Councillor Long?
I'm wondering, Worship, if you would allow, under special circumstances, that we present this motion now so these folks can go home. I've got it prepared. I actually sent a copy to Mr. Backen.
Well, that's just changing the agenda, and if you want to make a motion to change the agenda to allow for this other business to come up now, then...
Okay, so I'll make a motion then, if that's all right.
So I'll do it with unanimous consent if there's no issue. Okay, there's no further speakers on this, so thank you very much. You can have a seat.
Thank you.
Well done. Thank you. So by unanimous consent, if council is amenable to varying the agenda, we'll take this one order of business.
Okay, so whereas, and Mr. Backen has a copy of this, in 2015, the ALC decided to allow federally licensed medical cannabis operations on protected farmland, which opened the door for businesses and business people looking to cash in on the green crop. Well, we don't have to have that part in. Whereas Agricultural Minister Lana Popham has announced in January of this year that an independent commission will consult with farmers and stakeholders across British Columbia on the revitalization of the agricultural land reserve. Whereas the highest and best use on agricultural land should be agricultural food production. Therefore, it be resolved that the township write to Premier John Horgan and Minister Popham to place a moratorium on cannabis production on ALR land until the province consults with farmers, with municipalities, industry, and the public. And further, that the letter be copied to local governments throughout British Columbia asking for support and endorsement of this motion. I so move.
Second by Councillor Fox. Any discussion on that? I think we're good on that, so I'm going to call the question. And I'll label this one N3. That'd be appropriate.
Yeah,
N3?
we do M3.
Okay, thank you. N is November, right? All right. No, I've already. You want to speak to it? I've already called the question. Okay. Carries unanimously. No. Yeah. Councillor Fox.
Point of order, if I could ask that it also go to the Cannabis Secretariat and to the UBCM and Metro Vancouver
If we can
not directors, but staff.
Yeah, we'll take that as direction, Mr. Backen.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
FCM would be.
Okay, sure, we'll take that as direction. Okay, next delegation, Mr. Alan Hulef. Did I get that right? Probably not.
Good evening, Mayor Froese and council members. My name is Alan Haleaf. I'm a resident of Langley. I'm at 20508 49th Avenue. I'm a social worker and a college instructor, and I'm here to speak tonight about the Quality Inn. I've been a resident of Langley for about 5 years. I love my community, my neighborhood. When we moved here that evening, a neighbor and her family came over to introduce themselves and brought us over a tray of cupcakes. We since built strong relationships with all our neighbors, and all of us know that we can depend on each other. It goes beyond lending ladders or tools or borrowing sugar. It's the emotional support when one of us is going through hard times. We're there for each other regardless of the need. But in Langley, we have neighbors whose experience is much different than ours. Neighbors who are invisible until they are noticed for the wrong reasons. They're viewed as an inconvenience, a problem, or a nuisance, rather than as people who need our support. Instead, they're often treated with disdain and contempt by many in our community. Each has a story of how they got there. There are those who can't afford to pay housing, those who suffer from mental or physical illness, others with developmental disabilities. Some experience significant loss, while others have experienced significant trauma. Disturbingly, 40% of the homeless population were in foster care only to be re-victimized by the government when they aged out. Just like the people sitting in this room, each is a unique individual and faces unique challenges. I'm not here to give you statistics, show PowerPoints, or share research studies. I'm here to provide tangible, irrefutable evidence that supported housing works. I'm a lead instructor of a mental health and addictions worker program at a local college. Over 50% of our enrollment into this program comes from those who experienced homelessness, mental health, and addictions, and were frequently involved in the criminal justice system. We've had well over 100 grads, and some of them are in the audience tonight. Maybe you guys can raise your hands. One of those present was homeless from a young age, 13 years of age. Became a prolific offender to meet her basic survival needs, and was in and out of juvenile and adult jail. They finally accessed supportive housing and services, which led to treatment and sobriety. This person is now a college graduate. Their success is directly related to the housing and supports and services they received. I can describe case after case of individuals and where they are now, but I would need hours to do that. I think the important thing to focus on is the effect of supported housing and services on our community. Every one of them now work, pay taxes, spend money in your stores, pay for services, and contribute to our community in a positive way. Supported housing gives people a chance to change their lives. Many of those who are against this project state fears of what will happen when and if this project is implemented. I have brought with me someone who has a lot of experience in this area. Ishman Boulian was one of the organizers of Marpole Students for Modular Housing. He can give you first-hand account of the outcomes he observed with the tenants and in the community as a result of the modular housing project. Ishmael and some of my former students will be available to answer questions during the Q&A portion. I want to thank those who are against the project for being here tonight as well, because this dialogue is important. You have concerns. But there are many people in this community who are invested in making this project work for everyone using best practices. I'm hopeful that developing an understanding of who the homeless are and meeting people here tonight who were formerly homeless will help to address stereotypes and decrease stigma. We as a community have to stop marginalizing and start supporting, because by doing nothing, the homeless numbers will continue to grow. And if you think we have problems now, just wait a few years. The supportive housing project is an important part of the continuum of housing that is desperately needed to address homelessness in our community now and to prevent it in the future. I want to thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak. You have led community consultations where you explored the pros and cons, challenges and benefits. Now it's time for action. Homelessness should not be normalized. People experiencing homelessness need this housing. They need the supports and programming to address the individual cases that lead them to the street. I respectfully ask that you put this project through before the municipal election so we can get the healing process started for the homeless neighbors that are depending on you.
Thank you. There's no questions. Just to clarify one point, it's the BC Housing project, and they're the ones that led the engagement. It's not a Township of Langley project. They come here for rezoning. So at a future date, it'll come for rezoning. There'll be an opportunity for public hearing and input from the public at that point, just for information. Councillor Arneson has a question.
Yes, thank you very much for coming tonight. I appreciate your passion. I was wondering, so I get from the germ of what you're saying is your immediate concern is you understand that people need this help and they need it right away. So it's the degree to which we're doing it as soon as possible. So that would be more or less your delegation tonight to try and find out when this is coming forward.
Yes, it really needs to be going through as soon as possible. We have winter coming, and we have a homeless population that is living rough in the community, and we need to empty out some shelter beds so that people are able to access services and hopefully not freeze to death trying to survive.
Mm-hmm. You know, as the mayor mentioned, it is a BC Housing-led initiative, and so in that sense, we do require rezoning, and we're dependent on them to bring it forward. And I don't know what we could do at this time in order to advance that, you know, past when it will be coming. I personally don't have any insight about that, except to say that we've owned, well, BC Housing's owned the property since I think last October.
Okay. Thank you. My main idea of coming in here tonight was definitely to bring the face of people that have gone through those programs so the community understands the importance and to see the success stories. I'm proud of every one of my students. Some of the stories are just incredible, and I've shed tears in class listening to the tragedy that they've endured as young people and how society has treated them, but also see the resilience that happens when it's combined with the support of a community and the community resources that help lift them up out of the desperate lives that they were in.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Thank you for coming today. Just wondered about I didn't quite catch. Did you work in these kinds of programs yourself? Is that sort of where your experience comes with this?
I've got a bachelor's of social work. I've been working in the field since about 2003. I've worked in custody centers, both adult and youth. I work within the community. I do a lot of advocacy and outreach with individuals that are in the community on a personal level. I'm not affiliated with any of the organizations that are in town here. And I was just actually talking with Fraser Holland about getting on the advisory board once and if this program goes through to help support individuals and the community to work through this.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oops. Okay, I'm just going to ask again for Mr. Mark Elias if he's here. Okay, great. You can come forward.
Might sound a little unpopular. I drove from downtown Vancouver, so I apologize for being late.
Oh, we just changed the order. No problem.
Thank you for having me here today. My name is actually Mark Elias. I'm with KCD Consulting. We're a consulting firm. We do a lot of different things, but one of the things that we do is we're helping future cannabis retailers in the legal market open up stores, finding out different municipalities' regulations regarding zoning, buffer zones, whatnot. Each municipality is different. I found out that Langley and Township and the City of Langley do not actually have a policy in place, nor a draft policy in place. Things I wanted to point out, first of all, 30% of Canadians, and this is a study done by the University of Victoria, 30% of Canadians consume cannabis. Think of that number for a sec. And there's anywhere from $9 to $14 billion is what Canadians are spending on cannabis every year. The problem with that, it's all black market cannabis, all right? Unfortunately, in the black market of cannabis, up to 20% of that cannabis is controlled by organized crime. This is why the federal government, one of the reasons why the federal government decided to legalize cannabis was to, go take some revenues out of organized crime's hands and actually have a regulated cannabis product that's safe for the consumers, just like the government regulates all of our consumables. The provincial government, as I heard earlier, as you guys have all heard today, they have a Cannabis Secretariat, and among a lot of their responsibilities, one of them is to have powers to shut down black market cannabis, okay? The federal government has actually put in some tough legislation for trafficking in black market cannabis when cannabis is legalized. So we've got both the federal government and the provincial government making tangible moves to shut down the black market cannabis industry. The way municipalities can help is by making sure that legal cannabis is accessible to the consumer. All right? I don't believe Langley is any different than Vancouver or Toronto, for that matter, for cannabis users. I'm sure it could be more or less, but I'm sure it's around the national average, around 30%. So the more access there is, the more it will compete with the black market. And if you ask cannabis users, they'd rather go to a store. I live in Vancouver. We actually have stores. Yes, unfortunately, all of the stores are technically run by drug dealers over there because they are selling illegal cannabis or selling black market cannabis themselves in all of our dispensaries. But most of the cannabis users in Vancouver are now going to those stores. They'd rather go to a store than get it off of a dealer. All right? And I think that will be the case across Canada. October 17th is coming very soon. What other municipalities in the Lower Mainland? I have visited other municipalities in the Lower Mainland. They've created their own buffer zones. Some of them have gone as far as having identical zoning, land use permit zoning for alcohol retail, for liquor retail. So That's what some are doing. Some are making sure that they're 300 meters away from schools and community centers and whatnot. In Washington State, actually, some retail places are actually zoned. They're allowing the retail to happen in industrial zones. This is something that other cities can consider as well. So I'm just hoping that we'll get some clarity on if there's any direction that the Township of Langley is heading for cannabis retail licensing in your city.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to bylaws for first and second reading. We'll start with F1, rezoning application 100496 and development permit application 100916, bylaw number 5381. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Fox, seconder. Could I have a second? Councillor Whitmarsh. Discussion on F1. Hang on. I gotcha. Okay, Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through Your Worship to staff, I had a question of clarification with respect to the tree replacement formula in this development.
Mr. Steffi? And the question is in regards to what aspect of it? Just the tree replacement.
If I can just create a context, it seems from reading the numbers that the number of significant trees that are currently in place don't seem to be appreciably advanced by our policy here. So either I'm confused or there's something that I'm not understanding about it.
Mr. Steffi?
Your Worship, I'm not following the question. The requirements are pursuant to the bylaw and the policy. The bylaw requires a certain number of replacement trees if the trees cannot be retained, and for every retained tree there's a provision of a credit. So all I can confirm is that the proposal does comply with the bylaw requirements.
Well, I guess it's sort of subjective on my part, but when I read some of the other development proposals, it seems like when you start with a certain number of significant trees that are going to be removed, when you look at what the end result is with the replacement, it seems substantially more. And when I looked at this, it didn't really appear that way to me.
Your Worship, the replacement is a function of many different factors, including the number of trees that are able to be retained, as well as the size of the parcel. So in this case, it may be the reason for that sort of anomaly, if you will, as Councillor Arneson has referenced, is potentially because of the size of the property.
Also, then just a follow-up question. Do we have a policy for, in lieu of, taking the trees that would have otherwise been required and put them somewhere else?
Your Worship, if the site itself is unable to accommodate the number of trees that are required to be replaced pursuant to bylaw, then there are provisions, yes, indeed, for cash in lieu and installation or planting of trees elsewhere on township property or on parks or in riparian areas.
But this wouldn't apply for that?
They seem to have met the bylaw requirements.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh?
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that I noted in here was the significant number of parking spots compared to what is required. This might be, I'm trying to think in the 4 years I've been here, this might be the most parking provided over and above what's expected. And in light of our conversation earlier today on tandem parking, this has no tandem parking and 78 spots more than required. That's amazing. So let's move forward.
Thank you. I will now call a question on F1. Carries unanimously. Move on to F2, and this is the Yorkson Neighborhood Plan Amendment application number 100149, development permit application number 100902, and bylaw 5393. Could I have a motion? Councillor Arneson, second by Councillor Fox. And discussion on F2. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Carries unanimously. And move on to F3, Official Community Plan Amendment and Rezoning Application number 100165, and DP application numbers 100929 and 100934, Bylaw 5386 and Bylaw 5387. This is Vesta Properties. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Whitmarsh, second by Councillor Fox. Discussion on F3. Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Worship. I did have a question through your Worship to staff. I'm assuming that, as Councillor Whitmarsh has referenced, we did have a discussion earlier about tandem parking. So I believe the staff report said that 32 out of the 76 planned parking for the townhomes are tandem. That's at page 16 of the staff report. Have we made any kind of efforts to try and lower that number? I guess that's more or less half of them, but I just wondered if there had been some staff level discussion about that.
Steffi?
Yes, Your Worship. I can confirm that typically an application, once it's made, goes through extensive process of discussion and review with staff, and typically takes about a year and a half before it is ready for presentation to council. And those discussions have and will continue to be part of the comments that staff provide in terms of trying to accommodate as many of the parking stalls in a double arrangement, double side by side, as opposed to tandem.
Okay, thank you. See no further discussion, so I'll call the question on F3. And it carries with Councillor Richter opposed. And move on to F4, Official Community Plan Amendment and Rezoning Application number 100146 and Development Permit Application number 100889. This is Bylaw 5398 and 5399. It's Vesta Properties Limited. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Fox, second by Councillor Qualley. And discussion, Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I'm very, very concerned about this particular application because in our OCP, we actually have most of that area identified for office use or workspace. And it's important that we have office space, workspace available in the township if we want to achieve our long-term goal of a job for everybody who wants a job in the community. Now, on page 15 of the report, we're actually going to lose 3/4 of the designated office space in this area, and I think that's wrong. We should not be taking away job space to create house space. And for that reason, I mean, I'd just like to know from staff exactly how much job space we're losing as a result of this application.
Mr. Steffi, so the application in relation to the official community plan, what would be the designated office space, I suppose, a commercial space, as compared to what's in the bylaws?
Your Worship, we haven't done the calculation in terms of the specific question that Councillor Richter is asking, but the reference has been to this particular map that shows the existing Carval designations and the proposed designations, and the designation that's being proposed is High Street Mixed Use, which does provide for some employment opportunities at the ground level in terms of commercial retail, but also proposes residential on the higher level, second stories and up, and does have, does present a different scenario in terms of the employment opportunities, but I don't know what that is specifically.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it'll be nice lower paying service industry jobs that'll go into the red block there. But what about mortgage paying jobs, which is what office towers provide? Now, by us letting this amount of office space disappear, where's it going to go? Are we going to create more someplace else? It's just wrong. They should not be building housing where it's supposed to be office space. We're shooting ourselves in the foot long term by doing this. So I'm not going to support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Through you to staff, I'm wondering about the general disposition of these buildings, and I'm not sure, so if you could please clarify. I wonder if these buildings have automatic door openers of the type that when you walk upon the plate that they open up. I'm thinking about accessibility issues for the areas we continue to build out in an age-friendly community.
Mr. Seffi?
Your Worship, we have requirements for adaptable design and a certain number of units to be adaptable, and I can confirm that those requirements are being met. In terms of accessibility, I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Is the question to do with the type of doors?
Okay, generally speaking, I understand about the adaptable design. That's basically for the interior. This is more having to do with ease of access into the property. So that would be such things as having a level threshold and doors when you stand in front of it. They open up automatically, so if you're pushing a carriage or if you've got a walker, it's easy for you to gain access. That would be the question.
Your Worship, I can confirm that all those requirements are typically part of the building code requirements, the BC Building Code, and will be incorporated in the design.
Okay, thank you. I have an unrelated question, actually. With respect, if through your worship, if Mr. Savy then could also give some clarification regarding the high street concept, because I had the impression that it includes, in addition to the other mixed uses, some commercial component. So I'm wondering if there is some percentage of that would be commercial, because I'm just thinking about other commercial entities in the area and how this could be impactful to them.
Mr. Seffi?
Your Worship, as I mentioned earlier, the ground floor will be commercial. So the intent is to have the pedestrian orientation with the use of commercial and retail opportunities at the ground level of the high street, and having second stories and higher with residential uses, and that will provide the high street context.
I guess I'm not quite comprehending the high street. If you could just expand a little bit on what that means from your planning perspective.
I will ask Mr. Richardson, who is sitting by me, to see if he can provide a better context.
Thank you.
Through your worship to Councillor Arneson. So maybe reflecting back on the previous comment from Councillor Richter as well, to give some context. The blue noted on the map, office mixed use 1, allows for offices plus other commercial endeavors. As part of the designation and the background work that went in the Carvel plan, there were some assumptions made about, as Councillor Richter outlined, what the assumption would be for the floor space that would be expected to be generated out of that designation. So rather than that same floor space being provided, say, in a 1 or 2 story format, as the application exemplifies, is being provided in 2 7-story buildings, as well as some commercial uses which could provide those mixed-use buildings that would be in the blue designation and the red designation. So the threshold number for commercial-related floor space that was anticipated in the Carvel plan is reflected in the proposal. I think that's the first component. The second component being from a planning point of view about the high street mixed use. The high street mixed use, as intended, speaks to ground floor, retail, pedestrian-oriented uses. The proponent is reflecting those in terms of transparency of windows at the ground floor. The primary focus being on the pedestrian-oriented function, with only convenience-type parking facilities, high-quality design and materials, and buffering uses such as the high vehicular volumes on 200 Street from those high street mixed use, and internalizing some of those functions for the immediate planned neighborhood.
Good answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, on the same topic of this office mixed use and high street mixed use, the proposal here talks about creating in the office mixed space, making it higher density than what was originally called for, so have more office available, office space there, and then creating this high street mix with commercial space on the ground floor. This is the type of community that we've been wanting to have and that we've been encouraging. Walkable communities where people live in the area and they work and they live within that same area. And so in order to accommodate that and make it better and more walkable, getting people out of cars, they've calls for and asked for them to increase the permitted density in that office space area so that they still have a lot of office space, a lot of place for office type work, but also the commercial space with residential on top. I mean, this is good kind of planning, and it's the kind of planning that we want to continue in this community. And so I don't think we want to have a place where you go and drive your car, go to your office, and then drive your car back to your home. This is where everyone lives in that same location. It's the best kind of development that we are trying to encourage, and I'm not sure why we would want to stop that.
Thank you. Councillor Long?
I think I'm okay, Your Worship, because I wanted to point out the fact that those office, even though on that first rendering where it compares the old plan with the new plan, the blue and the red, the fact is that these are 7-story, right? So that's, and we've just heard that. So the 7-story office, I think the square footage is about the same.
Thank you. Councillor Qualley?
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of echo what Councillor Whitmarsh said. I think if we look at this whole project holistically, if you look at page 8 of the report where it outlines all of the phases, I think this mixed-use piece, the context of this makes tons of sense. And I think, like Councillor Whitmarsh says, there's going to be a lot of people living in that community, a lot of young kids who are going to want a job as a barista, who are going to, want some of those jobs that will come with this mixed-use piece that's in here. And I think, the township had a terrific opportunity not so many weeks ago to approve some really significant job plans in the Williams plan, and unfortunately that wasn't a unanimous decision of council. But I think this one is a really good opportunity to look at the mixed use and move forward. So I'm going to support this because I think the whole project as a whole, if we look at the bigger picture, I think this makes imminently more sense than sort of looking at it in bits and pieces.
Thank you. I see no further discussion. I'm going to call the question on F4. And it carries. The Councillor Richter opposed. Go to F5, Official Community Plan Amendment and Rezoning Application Number 100144, Development Permit Application 100875. Bylaw 5383, Bylaw 5384, this is Polygon Union Park Homes Limited. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Whitmarsh, second by Councillor Fox. Discussion on F5. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Oh, sorry. Nobody's. Okay. F5, call the question. And it carries. The Councillor Arneson opposed. And move on to bylaws for first, second, and third reading. G1 is development cost charge waiver for affordable housing. Council, a motion. Councillor Arneson moves it, and all kinds of hands go up. Councillor Sparrow was, I think, a fraction of a second ahead of Councillor Qualley, so she can second it. Any discussion on G1? Seeing none, I'll call the question. I just want to make a comment first. I want to thank staff for bringing this forward. This is something that is one small step towards assisting getting some affordable housing into our township. And I really do appreciate the work staff have put on. So with that, put into this. So with that, I'll call the question. And that carries unanimously. And there are no bylaws for consideration at third reading. We have bylaws for consideration at third and final adoption. I1 is land use contract discharge application number 100516, bylaw 5366. And this is Schinkel and Seacon. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Fox moves, seconded by Councillor Qualley. Discussion on I1. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Carries with Councillor Richter opposed. And bylaws for final adoption. J1 is Heritage Property Maintenance Standards, bylaw 5376 and bylaw 5377. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Sparrow, seconder. Councillor Fox. And what I'd like to do is ask or make a motion to refer this back to staff to put this forward for a public input opportunity at a future council meeting prior to fourth reading. So that'd be my amendment. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Sparrow seconds it. So on the amendment, close that. Discussion on the amendment. See none, I'm going to call the question, or the referral, not the amendment. Councillor Richter on the referral.
Yeah, well, so will this be a public hearing? Because that's what should have been done originally, I think.
Yeah, I'll just get some clarification from staff. I don't believe it should have been done because this is not that type of bylaw. It will be public input opportunity because it's not.
That's correct, Your
that type
Worship.
of bylaw.
The bylaw itself doesn't require a public hearing, but the process I think you're suggesting would be analogous to a public hearing, hence called a public input session that would look like a public hearing.
Yeah, which we do during our public hearings or future council meetings. So
yeah, well, I mean,
question.
I think it's really important that we get public input on this simply because people's private property rights are being affected by this bylaw. The other question that I have is with regards to our own building being boarded up with plywood and not with plexiglass. Will we be dealing with that one?
Well,
any buildings of the heritage area would have to be compliant with the bylaw once adopted, Your Worship. So the short answer is if the bylaw was adopted, we'd comply with it.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the question on the referral for J1. Carries unanimously. Move on to J2, Langley Building Bylaw Amendment number 2, 2018, Bylaw 5385. And Councillor Whitmarsh moves, Councillor Fox seconds. Discussion on J2. Seeing none, call the question. Carries unanimously. And hey, we're on to the Mayor and Council report. Just wait for the... All right, good evening, everyone. On Wednesday, June 13th, was a Khalsa School Achievement and Graduation Ceremony. I'd like to thank Dr. Carr, principal of the school, for the invitation to attend. This is a school that was is at 62 and 264th. It was an elementary school with the School District 35, which this school has purchased. And they have several campuses throughout Abbotsford, Langley, and Surrey with about 3,000 students altogether. So it was great to attend this. On Thursday, June 14th, was the open house for the Smythe CPA office located in Walnut Grove. I'd like to thank them for the hospitality and the invitation to attend. Later that afternoon was the Greater Langley Chamber of Commerce and Aldergrove Business Association's community networking open house at Bob's Bar and Grill in Aldergrove. It was great to see the turnout. Aldergrove has a lot to celebrate, and we are looking forward to the ceremony this Friday for Aldergrove Credit Union Community Centre and Otter Co-op Outdoor Experience, getting ready to welcome the public. So a good get-together, lots of businesses represented at Bob's Bar and Grill. On Friday, June 15th, I attended the BC India Lunch Networking event in Vancouver, where there was an address by the Consul General of India, Ms. Abhilasha Joshi. It was a great evening, and the food was amazing. So it was a delegation from India traveling throughout Canada, and had an opportunity to go and meet them and represent the Township of Langley. Later that evening, I attended the Langley Christian School graduation ceremony at Christian Life Assembly. Congratulations to all of the graduating students. On Tuesday, June 19th, was a Greater Langley Chamber of Commerce meeting with guest speaker Kevin Desmond, the CEO of TransLink, and very informative, a great speaker who kind of laid out where we are today with our mayor's vision and where we're going in the future. On Wednesday, June 20th, I attended the annual Langley Central Rotary installation at the Langley Golf Course. Rotarians do an amazing job of giving time and raising money to many charities throughout our community. And it was great to be to their installation and install the new president, President Paul Coutura. On Friday, June 22nd, was a Pear and Greenhouse school year-end ceremony for preschoolers. It was an exciting day of the children and especially the parents. Now, this is like a block away from this building, and this is a Montessori school. The building is designed specifically for it. It's a modular building that it's state-of-the-art for this type of school, and is their second year in operation, and just a great service to the residents here. On Saturday, June 23rd, was a Big Brothers Big Sisters fundraiser and the inaugural charity pub night at the Murrayville Pub, with all monies raised going to the charity. So I had a great time there roast beef dinner and a beer. It's pretty good. And raise some money. On Sunday, June 24th, was the annual Special Olympics Walkathon year-end event held at Walnut Grove Senior Secondary. I'd like to thank Christine and the group on the Special Olympics committee for hosting this event. And you see Councillor Davis and myself, we got there and we got lost. We took a wrong turn, so we had an extra walk, but we did find it eventually with Mr. Rich Coleman. On Monday, June 25th was the First West PCI groundbreaking, and that was this morning at First West's new head office in Carville. We're thrilled that First West has chosen to locate the new head office here. It's a great location at the gateway to our community and easy access for employees who will be coming here from throughout the Lower Mainland. The Carville area is growing and attracting a number of exciting businesses with employment-focused uses and is becoming a financial hub. We're pleased to see First West make this community their home. There will be approximately 500 jobs supplied through this new building. And I believe First West they'll have a portion of this building, and they have over 300 employees. So a great addition to the Carville area. And so upcoming events, Canada Day celebrations, July 1st in Fort Langley, the Langley Centennial Museum, and the Willoughby Community Park. So certainly lots to do for families. And also, as I mentioned earlier, on Friday at 11 a.m. will be the ceremony for the new Alder Grove Credit Union Community Center and Ardor Co-op outdoor experience. So with that is my report, and I'll ask, there's some councillors here. Councillor Richter, do you have anything to add on the report yourself?
I don't know why.
Okay, that was okay. Councillor Qualley, did you have something?
Nope.
Okay, there must be an old queue there. Okay. All right, so that's that. I'll go back to my agenda. And move on to other business, and I'm going to put Councillor Arneson on for her notice of motion from the other meeting, and one. Councillor Arneson, your mic is on.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just read the last paragraph of the notice of motion, and just because the wording is not all there, it's about the agricultural, it is about the strategy. I have it right here, the agricultural viability strategy. Therefore, be resolved that Council directs staff to utilize the existing criteria within the strategy as the framework for the AIA policy, and that the resulting draft form a presentation to Council prior to consideration for formal adoption. And so if I can speak to the motion. I need a seconder.
Seconder is Councillor Davis, and you can speak to it. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, I understand that Council has already endorsed the agricultural viability strategy some time ago, and so in effect, this is something that was a recommendation at that time. So the objective of this particular policy is to protect agricultural land for agricultural purposes in the Township of Langley. And so one of the actions that was put forward is to create the agricultural impact assessment. That's the AIA process, and that involves, at the expense of the applicant, every time we have an application to remove or somehow exclude land from the LR, that we require a checklist of information to be provided for Council's consideration as part of that application process. And so I do have a copy of it here. And I understand that we do receive a lot of contextual information and background information, and some of that is already included in the list. However, there are things that I think are very germane to what we've recently been talking about. For example, air quality, odor, and noise implications, traffic volume and safety considerations, buffers, the overall impact on agriculture. And so I think that it would be prudent for Council to actually have a reference. So every time, as I said, at the expense of the applicant, we could look at this, and I think it would really be very helpful to create more information with respect to whether or not we are moving this application forward. And it does refer to the fact that when the staff report comes back, what would have to happen is we need to amend our municipal development procedures to require this. Another recommendation is that we put it to our advisory committee as part of their review process, and that, yes, I said, that this AIA comes to Council every time we consider a development application in the LR.
Thank you. Councillor Fox, wish to speak to that?
Yeah, so just for clarification, Alienate lands in the ALR. What's it mean by alienate lands in the ALR? What's the definition of alienate? Is that a house site severance?
Well, maybe that would have to come back in the staff report. This notice of motion doesn't ask that we endorse this. It asks for staff to come back with what it could look like. That could be part of their analysis, because that wasn't something that I had considered. Severance to me is something that's pretty much enshrined in the legislation and something that we allow. So I personally wouldn't think at this time that that would apply, but I think staff would know best.
So my second point to that would be, and just by example, if I had 10 acres and wanted to divide it into 2 5-acre parcels, is that alienation? I'm just trying to get alienation of lands. I realize staff can have the interpretation, but you as the movie, what's your interpretation of alienation?
Okay, that subdivision wouldn't be alienation, because if it meets our requirements for a minimum size of property, then I still think that it's utilizable land. That would be up to the Agricultural Land Commission to determine if they thought that that was something that they would approve of. This is just a checklist of things that I think that we need to be aware of when we're looking at it, because I think part of our process, as I understand it, is to weigh and balance some of the considerations that have to do with our local government jurisdiction before we pass it on to the Agricultural Land Commission. So, no, I personally wouldn't foresee subdivision as falling into that category.
Is there any further discussion? I would just like to thank you for this, but I'm thinking this is more in the jurisdiction of the Agricultural Land Commission. When an application comes before council, we're looking at the implications of whether it fits with our zoning, with our policies and that sort of thing. And we had several examples earlier in the afternoon, and one of them, wasn't even recommended by staff, yet council felt that there was some extenuating circumstances where we could approve it. So having this information, I really think, is the jurisdiction of the ALC, not of the Township of Langley. We look at the zoning and policy. So I'm not sure what this would achieve other than to put an additional burden on applicants having to hire agrologists or whoever to put this together. And really that's something they'll be presenting to the agriculture, to the ALC, the Agriculture Commission. So I'm not going to support it at this time. Councillor Davis?
Actually, just to clarify, I think it an impact assessment process also has quality of soil. It has, if it's a swamp, and it has a lot more things that that a council member doesn't always know. Like, so I think it's a lot. It's more information. We get caught up on whether or not it suits the bylaw to go to the we get caught up on that. But this agriculture impact assessment process goes even deeper. It gives the council member a lot more to read, as though we need more to read. But it gives the aspect of so I would read that as a council member. I would read that and say, well, what the assessment says this, it's got 2 feet of topsoil, or it's all rock. So, and I'm being simple, but that's, so I would support this, because not everyone that runs for council and gets elected understands that. So it just gives the council member much more information to make a educated, or a better decision so that's my 2 bits.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Arneson. Actually, you spoke once, so I'm going to skip over you and then go to Councillor Qualley, and then push your button again, it'll show up as a Councillor Qualley.
Thank you. I'm also not going to support this, because I'm not even sure if we had that information, how we would begin to evaluate the information of how many inches of topsoil. That's not what we're being asked to adjudicate. We're being asked, as Mayor Froese said, to only adjudicate based on whether it fits our bylaws and our community plan. to my knowledge, there isn't a single person at this table who can adjudicate applications based on how much topsoil or the topography of a specific application. That's not up to us. It's up to the ALC to make those decisions and either agree or not agree that it has some agricultural viability, and then send it back to us. Once it's back to us, then we adjudicate on a development permit or rezoning or whatever needs to happen. So I think that having the proponent do this ahead of an application to council, when we're not even asked to adjudicate on it, is really a significant added expense that might not even be valuable to anybody at any point, because the ALC probably uses a different criteria and has their own experts that look at the viability. So yeah, I'm not going to support it either.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Well, Your Worship, I see some good parts and other challenging parts in this proposal. I wonder if we shouldn't refer this to the Agricultural Committee for their comment, or to staff to come back. I mean, rather than have to vote on it here, I think we should look into it some more in that respect. Would that be reasonable, that we could refer it to the commission or committee? What would staff say to that?
Do so?
Have you guys talked about it at your committee?
Certainly, if you wish to make that motion.
Well, I think that's what we'll do, rather than trying to vote on it here. I'd like to make a referral to the Agricultural Advisory Committee for their comments.
Okay. Is there a second by Councillor Fox? I'll open that up. On the referral, any discussion on the referral? Okay, so I'm going to call the question on the referral. And it carries with Councillor Arneson, Councillor Whitmarsh, Mayor Froese, Councillor Qualley opposed. And now we move on to N2. I'm just going to clear the queue. Councillor Arneson, you're back on.
Okay. My computer has to get up and running. Okay. Therefore, be it resolved, the Council requests the relevant agencies to review and amend the Income Tax Act and its associated policies in order to reflect the need to remove the barriers as outlined in the White Paper on Affordable Housing as presented at the BC Nonprofit Housing Association rent event in May of 2018 in order to enhance the potential for new affordable housing initiatives by nonprofits and charities within the township, and that this motion be forwarded to Ubcm, FCM, the federal government, and the federal finance department.
Second by Councillor Richter. One question, that white paper, is it available for staff? Do you have that?
It was included in our correspondence. I have a copy here.
Great. So staff will need that to refer to that if they're going to write that letter. Okay.
Can I speak to the matter?
Yes, you can. Yep. You
okay.
certainly can.
Okay. I just wanted to bring this information forward because I know not all of Council had the opportunity to attend this event, and I think it's really very important that when we're talking from a policy point of view, so we've got dedicated partners, we've got the provincial government, we've got the federal government, and they're coming forward with funding, and it turns out that after some time we've recognized that we have a really challenging problem with the fact that the way that the income tax is worded currently, I'm just going to read from the paper. It said, if a registered charity contravenes the act, it could lose its charitable registration. And so this requirement is then, if you lose your organization status, then you are effectively having to give over your asset to somebody else. The problem really, the crux of the matter is that when you create affordable housing, it is almost impossible, if not impossible, to create any affordability when you don't have this component of somebody who's willing to do it on a nonprofit basis. But the problem is that in order to sustain yourself financially over the longer term, which is what happened with the co-ops, you have to build in some capital reserve. But the legislation works against that happening, because if you have accumulated investment in capital, then that means that you're quote unquote offending the principles of having a profit. So what I noted from the workshop is that many well-intended nonprofit organizations are spending copious amounts of money on legal fees to try and figure out some way around this. And it just seems extraordinary to me. So the messaging I got was, what needs to happen is the federal government has to review its policies, and they have to change just in this regard, they have to change the Tax Act to more adequately reflect this current reality.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question on N2. That carries unanimously. And Councillor Arneson, during my report, I may have overlooked something that you had on the mayor's report, or right after the mayor's report. And if we can go back to the slides, there might be a slide there. I think I just quickly overlooked that. Yeah. Yeah. Just hang on. I'll get your mic back up. Did you wish to speak to that?
Oh, sure. Well, I can just make a couple of comments, just because it was such a great event. Are you going to show the picture?
I don't know if it's... Can we get that picture up on the mayor's report? That'd be probably the last slide. Just get it
right at the end. Wait for it. They're scrolling by.
Good review.
Slowly. Oh, yes. There we go.
There,
oh,
that was it there, yeah.
Got to back it up one. Okay.
Skipped over that. I think you wanted to say something on that.
Yeah. I just really wanted to thank all of Township staff who were involved, especially the museum. We had a wonderful community event, and it was called Behind the Lines. The edge you see in the signage, Contemporary Syrian Art, and that is an exhibition that's at the museum currently. But on the left, you will see a very energetic dancer from Ghana who was part of the entertainment. Part of it was having to do with, I think it's International Refugee Day. So it was a way to celebrate all of the different ways in which cultures come together and are relevant to our community. There was food, dancing, singing. I just wish I could do some of their moves, but regrettably not. Maybe 20 years ago. Anyways, it was a wonderful event, and I sincerely thank everybody who was involved, particularly the community partners, and I know that the Township of Langley was generous enough to offer a van so that a lot of the people who could not have otherwise attended got a nice shuttle bus to the event. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, any other business? Councillor Richter.
Yes, I have a couple of things here. First of all, I'd like to refer Mr. Woodward's delegation to staff for a report on this parking credits running with the land if there's a demolition permit issued, and also with regards to street-facing polycarbonate only. So that's my first motion.
Oh.
Do I need a motion?
Well, there's two things there. So one is the parking credits.
Yeah.
It's a report on that. And the other, I think, will be dealt with during the public input.
Okay.
So we can deal with that right now. So part one. So if you want, staff is, yeah. That's right. So this one's going to be referred to staff regarding the parking credits that were brought up. Yeah. So that's appropriate. So Councillor Long wants to second that.
You have to make a motion to refer that.
Yeah. So it's the motion to refer the delegation regarding the parking credits that was brought up to staff. So that's been seconded by Councillor Long. So any discussion on that? I'm going to call the question.
No,
okay. Did you want to speak to it? The referral? Oh, doesn't show up on this thing. Okay. It's funny. Strange. Okay, I got to go through this list. Councillor Long.
Yeah, well, this is the first I've heard of that being a concern, and there's a lot of stuff I haven't really fully understood about the situation there. So I think this is great that this will go to staff for some explanation. Let's get this conversation going again, because the other things that were mentioned by the delegate Mr. Woodward, is some other impasse that apparently council is aware of, and I really am not, because it has not come to council. So I think it would be great that we start to open up the box here and see what's going on.
Councillor Richter?
No, I have other things
Okay,
that
so,
I wanted.
yeah, we'll go back to Councillor Fox.
I've got things I want to bring up.
So, okay, so we're going to deal with the vote on this motion, which is N4. Carries unanimously. And Councillor Richter, you're back on.
So the street-facing polycarbonate only we will deal with after we've had the public hearing?
I believe that would be appropriate because we would make appropriate amendments to the bylaw at that time. So we could hear from the public and certainly refer it back to staff. We have all kinds of options at that time because it relates specifically to that bylaw. So there'll be an opportunity then.
Okay, the second item is in the items distributed to council today, item number 10, with regards to the Aldergrove Credit Union Community Center and the need for flashing lights in the crosswalk at the intersection. So I'd like to refer that to staff.
Is that the crosswalk at 271 Fraser Highway?
I'm not
Yep.
sure which one it is.
Yep, it is. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do we need a motion on that?
Yeah. Just,
Yeah.
so you move it? Second
I move it.
Okay, Councillor Qualley seconds it. I'll call the, well, let's do a show of hands. It's just referring item number 10, an email from Mr. Ian Elliott regarding crosswalk at 271 Street and Fraser Highway to staff for a report. So that's been moved and seconded. Is there, we want discussion on that? I'll call the question by show of hands. All those in favor? Opposed?
We're just referring to staff for opinion, because that said that we could put lights in. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it would come back. It would come back to us from staff, whether with implications, cost, and opinion. So, okay.
And
so that carries.
Okay, the third item is item number 9 on items distributed today, which is looks like a petition from people who live on Ben's Crescent relative to the Lintera development. And I'm wondering if we could get a report on that from staff. I'm very concerned. I understand that there's been a bunch of fill brought in, and as a result, we now have that cluster of new homes are going to be built considerably higher than the surrounding houses, as well as the existing road level. And I'd like to know how we can stop this from happening, because this is a very bad precedent. I think that our bylaws maybe need to take into consideration in the future the overall height. And anyway, if we could refer that to staff for a report as well. It's clear that the neighbors are concerned about this.
So I'll just ask Mr. Seffi, because there's a note here. It's been forwarded to the Community Development Division. Mr. Seffi, is there some work ongoing that we'll be getting a memo back already on this?
Yes, Your Worship, staff have received the same communication that was sent to Council, and staff is currently working through the process to find a solution, and certainly we can report back to Council.
That then it's already ongoing.
It's already ongoing. Okay, so, and will that report back to Council include requiring the fill be removed?
Well, they would, I'm not sure. They have to do their investigation, and then they will report back to us, so on what they find out. So we can't, I don't think we can make that decision at this point. Okay, Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Your Worship. I got several things here. My first one is through you to Mr. Seffi. When are my lights going to be started?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Your lights?
On 16th Avenue.
Oh, on 16th Avenue.
Please.
Yes.
Pretty please. Soon.
A little more
I think I'm trying to recall the update from staff, and I'm trying to recall what it was. I believe there's some utility coordination issues that we're trying to work through, but staff is working on them.
You're sure?
Positive.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I'll be asking you
this year.
I'll ask you every meeting. I've got 4 left. Every meeting I'll ask the same question, okay? So my second thing is, down here at the exit from this upper parking lot, it's a beautiful stop sign. I don't know if any of you have seen that beautiful stop sign.
Flashing lights.
It's a beautiful stop sign. And I understand we have 2 one there, and one in storage. Could we please, as a flashing stop sign pilot project, put that on 24th Avenue westbound at 264th Street? That road was paved, and within about 12 hours, there was a massive accident right there. I think someone was flying down 24th and, I don't know, missed the stop sign, whatever. I like those stop signs, by the way, in the rural area. Anybody not seen it, you can drive out and see it. It flashes, it's very bright all night long. Could we put that at 24th and 264th westbound as a pilot project, just to see what public reaction is to it? I think that they're LED lights and it's solar operated as far as I understand.
We can certainly take a look at it and see if it's feasible.
I realize it's going a bit above and beyond, but in some of the rural areas that might be useful to... we received some correspondence from Diane Cask on incentives in Aldergrove, and I know we had a report done in 2012 on this. We've already discussed this after the fact for our core plan acceptance. I'm wondering if we could dust off that report, please, and maybe ask staff for an update. I don't think much has changed. I don't think much will have to change in the report, but maybe it could be just forwarded to us how we discussed and agreed on incentivizing downtown Aldergrove redevelopment.
So just have the old report recirculated.
Yeah, recirculated. If there's anything that's completely out of line, maybe it could be just adjusted accordingly.
Okay. So
adjusted if
just,
there's only minor changes, but otherwise just give it to us.
So my comment would be, let's just get the report recirculated, and then at that point, if we want to provide more direction to staff, then we would need a motion. But I think with just direction, we could get the report, and then once we have the report, perhaps
whatever.
Ask for more.
Just get us the report then.
Yeah.
Meetings with ministers at UBCM. There's on the June 21st distribution list. There's a whole bunch of invitations for. I'm not going to UBCM, but if anybody is, can we please meet with the Minister of Agriculture or the Deputy Minister of Agriculture or the Deputy Minister of Agriculture?
I put that request in already. The request has already gone in through our
All
office
right, good.
We
should have mentioned that today to these people. Yeah. And on June the 21st, distribution list, item number 11, which is a letter from John Tomlinson on a highway use permit at page 36. Could we please refer this to staff and request staff to look at the possibility of adjusting the policy accordingly such that we could allow sidewalk type arrangements such as he's requesting for this for the Fort Pub and the Rail and River Bistro. I want to refer this to staff if we could for consideration of staff in revising the policy to accommodate street sidewalk bistro.
Okay. Do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Qualley seconds.
Can I talk to that?
Sure.
I was down there, I've looked at this, and I think that this is a really good idea. And I see, we were in Halifax recently. There's a number of restaurants that, I don't know what they do. They buy parking spots. Some of them, they use sidewalks. They make adjustments accordingly. Europe, this is prevalent in Europe, this kind of request that he's making here for people to enjoy the outside. Now, I'm not sure you want to do that in Fort Langley today. There might be a few mosquitoes enjoying your dinner with you, but generally speaking, I think that this would be a really positive thing to consider adjusting our policy to be a little more flexible to allow dining in areas like this. So I'd like to make that referral to staff for consideration and follow through, please.
Okay. I'll call the question. See for this. Oh, Councillor Davis. Yeah.
Sorry, it was June?
June 21st, page 36.
Because 36, okay. Now, I didn't get because we had some issues here Like, are you speaking of like putting chairs on sidewalks? Because didn't we have an issue here about a year or two ago with Wendell's and other things like that?
Yeah. So that was resolved with the highway use permit, but there.
That was
I think
what?
It was resolved at that point with complying with the bylaw. I think what you're just asking us to explore, it may or may not work in certain areas because of, Fort Langley is tight on parking already. So if we take away parking spots for tables and chairs, no. Yeah. So that's just something to look into, and it would apply to any area in the township. Yeah.
But in the last year and a half, 2 years, we've just kind of bolted into it, did we? Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
So-
no problem.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. So what number would that be? N4 or 5? So we've done a few.
N5.
N5, thanks. Okay, call the question. Carries unanimously. Any other business? Motion to terminate?
Termination.
Councillor Davis moves, second by Councillor Whitmarsh. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll take a couple minutes before the public hearing.